Hello, and welcome back to Talking Shop, a series of fun conversations with consummate concert artists, composers, opera singers, and choreographers. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to have a dear friend of mine and an unbelievable master of improvisation, Lawrence Patzlaff, professor of piano improvisation at the University of Music in Freiburg, Germany. Lawrence, it's so good to see you. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for being here. It's my great pleasure.
Well, I'm so excited to talk to you. Lawrence and I have been working together because I have needed a lot of help with improvisation. We've been working together for what, 4 or 5 years now? Has it been that long?
I think around that time, yeah, it's
Yeah,
been
yeah,
quite
yeah,
a few
yeah.
years.
Yeah. So I am so excited. There's not going to be nearly enough time to talk to you today, but we'll have some follow-up. So I'm going to ask you, as I do with all of my guests, the very first question, what does piano improvisation mean to you personally?
Well, it's actually my way of expressing myself in music, in arts. It's actually part of my artistic identity, I would say, because it's a way of creating music out of the moment, and that's actually who I am, I would say.
I think that's, yeah. I think that's definitely spot on from what, as well as I know you, that fits perfectly. Um, so I think a question that a lot of people would ask, you teach and perform improvisation in both classical and jazz music. What are the different ways you approach that? What's different about those different types of improvisation and how do you approach those things?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, learning classical music and learning jazz is mostly nowadays divided. You know, you have jazz musicians and you have classical musicians, and they are normally totally different type of people. Even the way they dress or the way they appear at university is different. The way they think is different, but I actually figured out that these differences are not as big as we might think. Um, because there are a lot of similarities in jazz music and in classical music, or maybe more than what musicians on both sides of the of the coin think.
Well, and I think that's very true. I know it's we even have a totally different department for jazz music at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, where I got my degree a couple of years ago. So, do you think that's a mistake or a disservice? Although I will say, stepping back a little bit, that the jazz musicians do have to take, I think, 2 semesters of classical piano. So there is a little bit of crossover, but interestingly, classical piano majors, are not required to take 2 semesters of jazz piano, which I think, in my view,
They
is a
should.
mistake.
They
Yes, they
should.
should. Talk to me a little bit about how each would benefit the other as far as becoming this,
Yeah.
well-rounded
I
musician
mean,
you're talking
first of all, to maybe elaborate a little bit on what you have said before, different departments and different teachers. I mean, that's maybe a product of the 20th century. In the 20th century, music became so sophisticated and so kind of like versatile, and there are so many different kinds of music that the specification was actually a logic outcome of that development. So in every kind of music we have actually specialists. I'm a specialist in improvisation and I devoted basically my life to that. But when you look back in the 19th or 18th century, it was not like that. So the musicians have always been seen as a person that is actually able to do many different kinds of things. So, for instance, a composer was never a composer on his own. He was also an instrumentalist, or at least a conductor, or both. So the idea that we actually separate everything in a specificated area is a product of the second half of the 20th century, actually. So and now we are in a time where crossover becomes more and more important. There are much more classical musicians who are interested in jazz and vice versa. So I think these borders or these walls between the these different types of music are going to be or probably will vanish in the future. You know.
That's really interesting. I feel that too. You know, I follow a lot of professional musicians on Instagram, and I see so many of them crossing over, and it's interesting. You know, I've kind of grown up as a pure classical music person, and yet, you know, there are jazz elements that we've talked about that I'm definitely using in my compositions and enjoying using them in a different way that really enhances classical music. So that I guess there's a little bit of an overlap, but it's more, in my view, of an adaptation of jazz elements into the classical genre. So I think that's just really, really interesting. And I do feel that things like improvisation and composing and all of these other aspects of musicianship, you know, piano majors don't get that. You know, we don't even get a lot of technique in a lot of instances. We just, you know, are told to do technique for the jury, and no, they don't even check if we're doing it right. So, I mean, that's here in America. I'm hoping that's changing, but it's just all of these elements, you know, theory and all of these things to me that should be brought into the piano lesson to really enrich that experience and frankly to make it more interesting. How do you feel about that?
No, I totally agree. I mean, the idea that we do so many technique and that we focus so much on only one thing has also its roots in the idea of perfection. You
Ah,
know, because the piano the kind of the piano world is so big, and if you want to survive in there or like have success, you need to be able to play on a very high level. But the thing is, nowadays we have so many extremely high educated classical pianists, more than we actually need in the market. So it's very unlikely that a piano student will be winning the Chopin competition in Warsaw, you know? So that's actually happening maybe to one out of, I don't know, 5,000 maybe. So it is, that's why we are slowly but steadily starting to look back into a broader education where we actually open up a little bit more to other music styles, to first of all enrich the education.
yeah, I think that's an important point. And I guess from my perspective, I don't see, I agree with you. I feel like there's going to be this migration, and hopefully, even in the competitions, and we can debate whether competitions are that important or not. I think, you know, depending on your lens, but I don't feel that this melding of different things would be to the detriment necessarily of classical enthusiasts, because there are a lot of jazz musicians who love Bach, who love, you know, Chopin, all of these classical artists, and who use themes. I mean, I think even the Beatles used some Bach themes in their songs. So, you know, being open to looking at that, and how different people are using different things. I mean, you know, I think if you are not well educated, and proficient, that maybe those elements could be used to the detriment of the classical genre. But I do believe that instead of being a detriment, it could be an enhancement and possibly shape a new future for classical music down the road, which is very important to me. I see a lot of younger people very interested in classical music in the traditional form, but also in these new forms. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean that's totally right, because you have to agree or to kind of accept actually that you cannot, or it's very unlikely that you are going to be a jazz musician and a classical musician at the same level, you know, because that like takes too much time to practice and to work. But I think, as you mentioned before, that's probably not the goal, you know.
Right.
The goal is to have a broader view and to speak more languages than just one. And through speaking more languages and being able to see a brighter variety in the music world, I think we all can be better teachers and better artists as well. So I think the future is not so much about perfection in just one thing. It's more in the variety and in the kind of broader styles that we can offer to the audience as well as to our students.
And I love the way you describe that as speaking different languages. That's just very intriguing to me. It's just a beautiful way to put it, I think. Um,
Thank you.
your bio says that Leonard Bernstein was a role model for you. Let's talk about that because if there's anybody who was able to speak different musical languages, it was Leonard Bernstein.
Absolutely, and he is a role model for me for me because just of that, because he was never really making a distinction between jazz, pop, or classical music. And I think he even once said that there's only like good or bad music for him, but it's not like, okay, this is jazz, this is like something we have to look with a different perspective or with different glasses, you know. And if you look at his education videos when he does this series with the New York Philharmonics, it's fascinating how he switches between songs from the Beatles and music by Debussy, for instance. You know, he includes everything because he just sees the quality in the music, but not the origin.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think, you couldn't have picked a better role model actually in that sense. And it makes perfect sense to me why he would be a role model for you. Um,
Yeah.
when you perform, I mean, you perform all over the globe. I mean, you've had so many lovely trips overseas lately. What are you trying to share with your audience? Because you're in different cultures. Um, bringing part of yourself. You're bringing yourself and your own culture to different culture. What do you think about what you're trying to impart to these audiences? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Well, first, it's very interesting because people are different, and that's good that people are different all around the world. But funny enough, I find it interesting that in some parts people are not different at all, you know, because music is a language that everyone can understand, and I think sad music is sad in the United States as well as in Africa, Asia, or in Europe, you know, more or less. But still, I think no one would like dance to a sad song in a funny way in China, and wouldn't do it in the United States, or vice versa, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think this is something that connects us all, and I find it interesting. The same with improvisation, that even people who have never heard someone improvising on the spot, the audience is reacting pretty much the same all around the world. You know, first they are a little bit, maybe how to say, like astound. You know, they kind of think like, okay, what is that? But as soon as they kind of as we say in German, they melt or you break the ice, then they go for it and they're totally enthusiastic, because when I improvise, it's something that has never been heard before and will be never heard again unless you record it. But in that live session, it's like um, a thing that is only happening one time, so it's truly unique. And when the audience can actually participate in that process, when they maybe choose a theme or a motive, they
Oh,
actually start to I wouldn't say interfere, but more like to participate into the concert process, you know. And
so
that
that's
is a highly even sometimes even a religious feeling, you know, because something is happening that is like, as I said, truly unique and only in that time. It will never be like this again.
right, right. So do you always offer the audience to make suggestions and for you to improvise upon, or is that something you just do occasionally?
I try as much as I can. I mean, of course, it is not always easy because, as I said, people are not always used to it. So,
Yes.
in even yeah, in many countries where you have maybe a more conservative audience, people are used to go to classical concert, and consume what is there,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
are not used to kind of like participate actively in the process.
Right.
But people are not dumb. They are quick in learning, so if they learn, okay, this is how it works, they have fun. They have fun in kind of designing the process together with me.
Yeah, I think that's just absolutely fantastic because, I think a lot of times people want to see the program. They kind of want to know what to expect. They actually attend the concert because they know certain pieces are going to be played. So, how does that work with you? How do you bill your concerts in as far as attracting people so that they'll be interested in coming to hear what you have to say on the piano?
That's a very good question because, as you say, like people who don't know about improvisation maybe think it is either a jazz concert or like a jazz only concert, or they think it is maybe some avant-garde thing where I kind of like dance around the piano or kind of like use extended techniques only. So they don't really know what to expect. So the people who host my concert usually advise me to play at least one or two classical pieces
Ah,
to attract the more conservative audience. So if I play a Beethoven sonata or Mozart sonata or both, they will come because they know it's something on the menu that they can actually eat. you know. So but normally the reaction is very interesting. Even when you read the reviews of my concerts in the newspaper, they appreciate my classical music works and also my standard, but it's usually like with a few words and like, yeah, appreciate it in a polite way. And then the rest of the review and also the audience reacts exactly the same, is about the improvisation only. Why? Because that's something not everybody does, and it is spontaneous and kind of like reacting on the, as I said before, on the audience, on the ideas of the audience.
yeah.
And many people have never experienced that before. So the reactions also in the applause is usually much more enthusiastic than when I play just a classical piece.
Yeah, I think it's just so lovely that you have a specific way that you can involve the audience, and because they're obviously going to be much more engaged in the program when you do that. And I am sitting here thinking how difficult it has been for me to learn to improvise, and I'm certainly no master at it. It's going to take me a lot longer, but
Mhm.
it has helped in so many ways. But it's also petrifies me to think about getting up there in front of everyone, not knowing exactly what I'm going to play and just depending on, that flow to come. It seems very adventurous. So I'd like to know a little bit more about the adventures that improvisation offers you as a pianist. And do you improvise on other instruments? And tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get started in improvisation?
Well, that's another very good question, actually, because I've been talking to many classical musicians about actually stage fright as well, and about when do they feel good or not. And they told me, like, I have no idea how you can do that. If I would have to improvise, I would kind of like be so afraid that I don't know what to do, because I'm sitting there and I have to kind of do something that I don't know how the outcome will be. And I tell them, well, for me, it's the opposite. If I sit there and I play a Beethoven sonata, yes, I can do that. But I know, like, 60% of the audience will know that piece.
Yes. Yeah.
So they know what to expect. So if I make a mistake, they will recognize the mistake. They will actually identify the spot where I played wrong. So that actually is for me much more making me much more nervous than when I can invent my own thing and nobody knows how the piece is going to start or to end or what's happening in the meantime. So for me, it's the opposite. Improvisation for me is freedom. It's something that I can do, and I can do whatever I like. Of course, the outcome maybe is not always satisfying, but that's as we say, risk of life. It's kind of like we have to accept that. And I started improvisation actually when I was a kid, but I never really learned it. I never learned it systematically. And I only started thinking about it systematically when I had the professorship, because then I had to teach it. So I
Yeah.
had to actually think about, okay, how to make that accessible for people who don't know it from the start. And maybe it was because I was always like a creative person. I think I was also inventing stories as a kid. I was drawing pictures and all kind of things that are coming from the creative mind.
Mhm.
But I also have to say it took me a long time to be able to read music. I found it as a kid very complicated,
Mhm.
and I'm not a big fan of. I can sight read, of course, I
Sure.
can do that. I developed that ability, but for me it's not the most fun thing, so I'm not. Some of my colleagues, for instance, they tell me, oh, in the last semester holidays I've been sitting down just playing Beethoven sonatas from sight reading. And okay, I could do that too, but it's not a fun part for me. I'm not enjoying this, so I think I have better things to do than that, because I want to learn a better level of improvisation, for
Mhm.
instance.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's how I actually got into that subject. And the funny thing is, because I was actually taught more or less conservative. I had very good piano lessons, but when I was a kid, I had a rather conservative teacher, and she accepted that I was improvising, but she never told me that this is something special and something not everyone can do.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was much later in life. I was actually in my mid 20s when my piano professor told me, it's like, okay, this is really something interesting. Like none of my students can do that. You're the only one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and okay, let's do it in concert, kind of improvise something on a topic, on a theme suggested by the audience.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, really, okay, would they like to listen to that? And so I gave it a try because he suggested me to do it, and that's how I actually got into it. But before I thought it was never really valued as an art form. And that's also a problem, because we forgot that it was an integral part of the classical music education in the 18th and 19th century. And then we totally forgot about it. That's why we actually don't still don't appreciate it that much, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're the only person I know who is a professor of improvisation, and maybe that's more common in the jazz side of things, but as a classical pianist, I've never heard of that before. And you're quite unique in that, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And it sounds like this particular teacher was a pivotal teacher for you. But although I feel that this would have come out for you at some level anyway, but I think when a teacher kind of confirms an ability we have, it gives us confidence and incentive to move forward with it. And thank goodness for that teacher, because, you know, as I said, you might have done it anyway, but maybe it wouldn't have been for a while longer, and maybe you would have felt a little pressure to stay within the norm.
Totally, because as a normal piano professor, he would have told me, look, if you want to survive, you need to kind of win this competition. So you need to be able to play all Chopin etudes, you need to be able to play all Beethoven sonatas, and so on.
Yeah.
So that's what many piano teachers tell their students, and it's right in a way. But I feel like, okay, first of all, I don't think I'm able to do it, or if I'm able, it takes too much effort. I it's kind of like the effort is not worth the outcome.
Hmm. Hmm. I think it's so special too, because it's obviously, as you said in the very beginning of a conversation, that's who you are. And to be able to have a teacher who recognizes that, number one, and then supports it, number two, and allows you to be fully who you are as a person and as a musician. To me, I can't separate those two. It feels like you can't either. But that's just such a gift, and it's so golden, and a gift to the world as well. I really do wish that more teachers would have that radar, kind of.
Totally, totally. But as you said, it was very much my piano professor who encouraged me, because he always he let me be,
I
he
love
never
that.
put pressure on me or anything. He said like, okay, you go your own way, you do your thing.
Yeah.
I support you with whatever I can, but I'm not leading you in a way where you might feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So when you play classical pieces, how do you feel? I know you said you felt nervous. Do you
Hmm.
get, how do I phrase this? Do you get as much? I know you don't get quite as much joy. I don't know, maybe. Do you get as much joy out of those as you do?
Well, I
What is
do.
appealing? Yeah. What is appealing
Yeah,
about
well, I
them?
do, but I feel like, okay, this is first of all something, as I said before, what it sounds very simple and maybe not very, not with a lot of self-esteem, but it's something that other people can do better than me. So I
Ah,
think like, what is the need to kind of do this or kind of work at this for the highest perfection if
mhm.
I can do something that not at least many other people can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what is your answer to that question?
So the answer is yes. In some, of course, I can enjoy playing Mozart, Beethoven, and Bach. I can do that, but to really feel like, how to say, like to be on a like on a trip, to be like a really high from music, I can only have that when I really improvise, because then I'm free, then I can let myself go. Then I can also be uncontrolled, which is also a nice feeling, what you almost never have when you play classical music, because you have to be in control of the technique to play the right notes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds to me though that, you and I talk a lot about things that inform our processes. It seems to me that the classical pieces or the classical education just further informs your improvisation. I mean, the improvisation obviously is a gift that you have naturally, but would you say that that's true, or what other things inform your improvisation?
Well, of course, to improve my improvisation, I need the classical music as a source,
Uh-huh.
because what I do mostly is analyzing pieces and try to get into the composer's head and try to kind of, yeah, to participate of his way of inventing music.
Yeah,
And the thing is, like, if you want to learn music as an art form, or as a creative art form, you need to copy things from the master. I mean, every artist did that.
right.
No artist was born and just invented great art. If you look at Beethoven, Mozart, or at painters, they first copied things from the masters and developed that into their own style. So it's
Yeah.
more a process of transformation, and a
Ah.
lot of like, yeah, how we put things together and rebuild things, but out of material that is already there.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I almost every day I'm analyzing some bars of a music piece to find something that I can use for my own improvisation. And if you look at the sketchbooks, for instance, at Olivier Messiaen, he had a huge sketchbook with exactly that. So he copied a few bars from Stravinsky, a few bars from Mozart, and all of that things that he found interesting, and used it as a form, or like as a tool for transformation.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely golden nugget for composition, which I think we should save for another discussion with you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so I wanted to touch on the time we have left on your dissertation. Congratulations,
Hmm.
you just fulfilled your requirements for your doctorate, and
Hmm.
I'm so thrilled for you. And
Thank you.
the topic of your dissertation is it just makes me light up inside because my first love is opera, and
Hmm.
the focus of your dissertation, from what I understand, is that you're taking operatic phrasing. Why don't I just ask you what it's about and get you to tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah, it's a PhD in artistic research. So artistic research is, I think, in the United States, not that new, but in Germany it is, because in Germany we had only like the PhD as a philosophical doctor only. So we still like at the start of introducing DMA programs and all that kind of things, which have been around in the United States for decades. But that's like, Europe is in that case a little bit behind, I would say. So the artistic research idea is, first of all, I've been looking at opera paraphrases by Franz Liszt and the composer who's pretty much unknown today called Sigismund Thalberg. But at the time of Liszt, he was his biggest opponent, his biggest competitor.
Wow.
And in many reviews of that time, they were mentioned in the same sentence. It was the reviews always were mentioning Liszt and Thalberg, Liszt and Thalberg, Liszt and Thalberg. So it's quite interesting that opera paraphrases were actually, you would say today, a medley of an opera put into a piano reduction to be able to play at home. Because
Wow.
at that time there were no CDs and there was no TV. So when you wanted to listen to opera melodies at home, you had to play them on the piano, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, my task was, or I made this task to find 11 paraphrases who are dealing with the same operas from the two composers. So, for instance, Don Giovanni by Mozart,
Uh-huh.
there's a paraphrase by Liszt and a paraphrase by Thalberg. But because they are looking at the same opera, they're using the same themes. So I was trying to find out if there is a difference how Liszt is using parts of the Mozart opera and how Thalberg is using the same melodies, how they are actually arranging them, how they are developing them. And from what I learned there, I tried to transfer that into my own improvisation process, you know. So I tried to learn from the masters and put what I learned into actually concert action.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, I just think that's fascinating. There was this period where I think opera was really in its heyday, and that was very common to do, and everybody was trying to copy everyone else, and
Totally.
use opera as a method of gaining stature, I guess, in the music world.
Mm.
So I think this is just really such a fascinating topic for that reason. And another thing that strikes me is opera is so dramatic. I love how
Yeah.
dramatic, and especially Liszt. I think that's why I'm so drawn to Liszt's music, because he's the over the top drama is just
Yeah.
so appealing to me. And I think it's a wonderful outlet, especially when you think about classical music. Often we think about this reserved, audience, and
Hmm.
and this
Hmm.
just breaks that totally
Yeah.
open, which is wonderful. And I do feel a resurgence again of younger people's interest in opera. I know in our Virginia Opera there is a special group for people under 35 or 40 called the Prism um,
Hmm.
group. And I we just started attending Virginia Opera recently, and I was so blown away by the number of young people who were there. And not only that, but who were
Great.
dressed to the nines,
Hmm.
gowns, black tie, which is, of course, like it used to be years and years
Hmm.
ago,
Hmm.
which is, again, so lovely, I think.
Cool.
I'm very excited about the resurgence in that opera interest. What I see as a resurgence in classical music interest. And, another topic at some point could be, I feel like universities are almost way too behind in catching up with this new wave of interest. I mean, from really young people in their teens, um, in classical music and opera, and all of these quote traditional genres. And some of them are even downsizing programs, and I'm like, that's such a mistake,
Hmm.
because if you want
Hmm.
to grow as a university, why not look to what is appealing to younger people? And
Yeah.
you hear the statistic that only 3%, of the audience listens to jazz or listens to classical music. I never
Hmm.
have believed that. And I
Yeah.
think maybe it was true at some point. It's like so many other studies, you get a study to kind of almost say what you want it to say. But, I don't want to discount the researchers, because I'm sure that was true at a certain point, perhaps. But it's like, obviously things come in and out of favor. But I do feel that we're on a very exciting cusp of this resurgence. And I feel that improvisation is having a great part in that resurgence, and the appeal, all the things you talked about, the ability to transform things from traditional classical music into something new and interesting. It's just so phenomenal. And I wish we had all day, but I know that neither of us does. So we're going to have you back. I so appreciate your being here today, taking time to talk with us. And I hope you'll do some further research. You can find contact information on for Lawrence on the Freiburg University, yeah, University of Music website, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I had it correctly because I was trying to think of the German terms and I knew that was going
Yeah.
to be a fail.
Never
So,
mind.
yeah, but thank you for being here today and please stay tuned and we'll look forward to seeing you again our next Talking Shop episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lawrence.